Welcome back, everybody, to the to our next technical talk. This is a great talk. By the review judges, this was rated as one of the highly rated talks. So really looking forward to this. So this is given by Carla Trevino from Irdeto. She's a solutions architect of connected transport at Irdeto, and before joining, she worked in several positions at Daimler, which left her a vast experience in the automotive industry. She has been working on an international setup with projects covering different markets with a focus on Latin America and the European Union. She's specifically working on projects on topics related to connectivity, electromobility, and autonomous. Um, yeah, Carla, and the stage is all yours.
Thank you very much. And yeah, hi everyone. Cool that you're still here. I know it's, I think, the last session of the day. So good that you're still here. I'll try to make it as fluent as possible, not to get you bored or anything like that. So getting straight to the point, I will be talking today about secure EV charging and the standard or the protocol that is currently being implemented, plug and charge. A little on what we're doing as Irdeto, but also how the industry is going along and what are the challenges that we're facing. Um, yep. Okay, now I see how I change it. So, agenda, a good presentation always has an agenda, but I can skip it because it's not that long. So, I hope you stay with me. Yeah, so a little about myself. So, I was already introduced. Thank you very much for that. So I'll talk a little about my company, Irdeto. So Irdeto is a world leader in digital platform security. We have been doing cybersecurity for 50 years. Started on the video media, video entertainment business, and from there derived to different business lines, including the connected transport, which is the business line that I work for. The company, we're located, we have a worldwide basis. We have 14 offices all over the world. Our headquarters are in Amsterdam. That's where I am located. And our customers, we also have a database from customers that are spread all over the world. Throughout our 50 years in business, of course, we have impressive numbers to show about the number of devices and applications that we have secured, which are in the order of billions, software licenses that we've issued that are also on the order of billions, and on the topic of today, over 1 billion PKI certificates have been issued by our company. We are a company that has around about 1,000 employees, and 70% of our workforce is actually in research and development. That means that we are a company that is really into the developing the solutions, looking at where the industry is facing, looking into the future challenges, and so on. And from there, we have over 360 patents in our name. And one of the patents that we use the most, or that we are the inventor of, is the white box cryptography. This is a technology that we use for securing our different solutions, our different industries. And it's also something that it's widely implemented in the PKI, which is the topic that I'm going to talk about today for the EV charging stations. Yeah, so now going to the point of today. So why do we need to secure the EV infrastructure? So sorry, I skipped one slide. So this might not be a surprise for any of you, but as you know, the number of EVs that we're seeing on the street are increasing massively in the years, and they will continue to increase. And the numbers that I'm showing here on the chart is the market share of the biggest worldwide markets, we can call it, so US, Europe, and China. However, we know that this is a global phenomenon that is happening. And of course, with the rise of all the electric vehicles that are coming to the street, there is a requirement for usability of these vehicles, also for the infrastructure for being able to charge these vehicles. There is no good use case if you have a nice vehicle that can only be charged in your house, because you can only get somewhere, or you can only get around your house, right? So you need to have infrastructure spread all over the city, all over the country, infrastructure that you can rely on and that is convenient. So usability is a topic that has been, I would say, not so great for the past years, and this is where plug and charge comes into place. So plug and charge is protocol that simplifies the charging process. So, as the name explains it, basically the user comes to a charging station, you take your car, you plug it in, and everything happens on the back end. So all the billing is doing on the back, it's being done on the back end. That means that you as a user, you don't have to interact anymore with the charging station. You don't have to put your data. Everything will be transferred, or everything will be happening on the back end. All the security, of course, of this has to be handled on a very high level. um, one of the great use cases of the plug and charge is that it gives the possibility of transferring electricity from the grid to the vehicle. But another use case is also allowing the vehicle to transfer electricity into the grid. This will enable a lot of very interesting use cases in the future, but this brings also additional challenges to the ecosystem. Those challenges is, of course, I mean, one of the biggest risks, and I'm going to talk about this right now, is that you're now opening the access to the grid to the public. um, there are various risks that are associated with PKI as such, but especially with implementing the plug and charge. um, yeah, so implementing the plug and charge, therefore we need to implement the PKI. So these are some of the security risks that we have detected on, like, the biggest ones that we see so far, and the industry will be facing, the industry as automotive, but also as the users, right? So there can be attacks on charging station. the they can harvest the data, they can add monetary charges to your users, they can render the charging stations for whatever malicious usage that they want to give them to. There can be attacks on the vehicles, so they can infect the interface between the charging station and the vehicle itself. They can infect the ECUs and therefore manipulate or have a different vehicle behavior of what is intended. There can be data theft. So there are several stakeholders that are communicating, or that have a place in this ecosystem. I will talk about all of those stakeholders in a second, but the number or the amount of information that is available and that is being stored there is massive. So it can be a potential risk of taking that information and using it for some malicious usage or whatever. There can be an attack on the critical infrastructure. So they can do, like, very typical attacks, like, I don't know, fake overloading or distributed denial of service. And with this, have control of the grid, which can lead to, for example, living a city without electricity. That is nothing we want. And last but not least, energy theft. So they can just have control of the grid and take energy for their personal usage, whatever that can be. Those are some of the risks of why the whole ecosystem needs to be protected. And yeah, I was talking about stakeholders. So we have numerous stakeholders involved in this ecosystem that goes from energy provisioning companies, electricity, the vehicle supplier, the installation and field services, the people that own the site, the asset owners, the charge point operators, the e-mobility operators, and all of these stakeholders, they all have information. They are all interacting amongst each other. And we have to have a secure communication amongst all of these stakeholders through the whole data stream. And how are we doing that? We are doing it by implementing PKI. Well, the PKI, specifically in an OT system, should not be underestimated. There are many complexities that come on an overall implementation of the PKI, and specifically on an OT world. Um, some of the challenges I will just mention right now. We have to be conscious that the OT is different than the IT. The security that is needed for the fielded devices is different than that is needed for the IT. That is basically due to two big reasons. One of them is that the ecosystem is not as established as the IT ecosystem, as we know, and there are not that many standards that are in place for this ecosystem, so it can't be handled the same way. There is a high investment needed for the implementation of a PKI. You need root key security, you need secure key facilities, you need trained personnel, and all of this throughout the lifespan of the vehicle. You will need this high investments, and it's something that everyone should be conscious about and should know. The volume of certificates that will be issued throughout the lifespan and throughout the entire global ecosystem is humongous. So you have to make sure that your implemented PKI system can handle that amount of certificates. Um, Within the charging infrastructure and within the whole ecosystem, of course, you will have PKI, but you will have also other kind of secrets. So it is recommended that the system that is implemented can handle PKI certificates, but that it can also handle all other kind of secrets like passwords or any kind of symmetric, asymmetric secrets, and so on. And again, we have to remember that we're not talking about like cell phones that you're changing every 1 to 2 years, maybe, but we're talking about assets that will be there throughout a big lifespan. We can talk about something, if we take the vehicles, for example, about 15 years, they will be out there. And you have to make sure that whomever or whatever solution you're implementing for your PKI is going to be reliable and it's going to be stable throughout that entire lifespan. Um, just some of the complexities that are nothing of this world, but they have to be considered while implementing a PKI in this ecosystem. Now, going into the matter of the plug and charge, we have a family of standards of the ISO 15118. So we have the -2, -20 that is actually talking or giving us all the algorithms and the all the structure for implementing this vehicle to grid, grid to vehicle communication interface. Is giving us the direction on how to handle the data security, data integrity, and the secure authentication that will happen amongst these different devices. As I mentioned before, this standard is already implementing, or it's already facilitating the bi-directional charging opportunity. So from the grid to the vehicle, from the vehicle to the grid. Um, what we're seeing here is basically um, the so now getting into the PKI and the plug and charge. So what we're seeing here, we're seeing a 4-level hierarchy. This is basically what is defined by the ISO 15 family of standards. So they defined a 4-level hierarchy with different roles. We're here seeing the role or the point of view from the charge point operator, right? So let's get into the topic. First of all, what are we talking about? PKI, public key infrastructure. The principle of the PKI is um, using public and private keys for encrypting the data exchange between the different stakeholders, between the two parties that are gonna talk between each other. So how they talk about to each other? They do a secure handshake. We will get into what they share on the secure handshake in a second. First, I just want to go to the basics. The principle that is being, or the configuration that is being implemented here is one of the most common PKI configurations, which is the tree hierarchy. What does that mean? So if we imagine a tree on a forest or wherever, we know that they have roots and they have leaves, right? So they have a solid root from where the tree is founded, so the foundation, and then you have the leaves, which are like the end of the trees. So you can see it like that. So you have to have in your mind those two concepts, the root and the leaves. So the root is the foundation and the leaves are the end of them, let's call it. So this is the principle of the PKI. So here, as I mentioned before, we have 4-level hierarchies. We start by the root certificate authority. So first of all, it's important to know that there is a trust authority that is a single root that is trusted by all participants of the ecosystem. So all participants trust this root, this trust authority, and this root, and they have that the root certificate for them. Then on the end part, we have the leaf certificates. We have the leaves. So the leaves, normally in the case of the charge point operator, for example, this leaf goes into the SEC, which is the chip inside the charging station. So they have that certificate. So they have that information inside themselves. Um, so what happens here? So the root certificate gives a digital certificate that needs to be signed by a sub-certificate authority 1 and a sub-certificate authority 2, and there and then those are get to the live certificate. The live certificate, what one concept that is important to know is that it's a certificate that is not going to be signed anymore. So it's the end of it. And between the sub certificates, you have a digital signature, right? So you have this um, this rooted this rooted trust of chain, right? And the chain is consisting of the leaf certificate, in this case the SEC certificate, the sub 2 certificate, and the sub 1 certificate. So when this handshake happens between the charge point operator and a vehicle, let's say I'm a vehicle that has never interacted with one charging station. I don't know that charging station. I don't know if I can trust it. So, how do I check the trustworthiness? The trustworthiness, we do the handshake. Through the handshake, this chain is given to me. So I get the leaf certificate. I have the CA2 and the sub CA1. I can check that my sub CA1 is linked to the root certificate, which I know and I trust. So because I trust the root certificate, I now started trusting the sub 1 CA. And then I check the sub 2 CA, and I see that the sub 2 CA is signed by the sub 1 CA, which I trust because I just started trusting because it's linked to the root. So now I trust the sub 2 CA. And now I go to the leaf certificate and I see that it's signed by the sub CA2, which I now trust. So now I know I can trust the entire chain because I trust the root. One concept that is very, very important here is that there must be very few numbers of trust authorities so that you can have as many leaf certificates as you want, but you only have to trust limited, like you only have to know the root certificate, and that's the only information that you need for trusting. So I hope this gives you an overview of how this works. um, so that's on a very summarized matter. If you have questions, please feel free to do them at the end. One very nice news that we have shared in the last months is that we are collaborating with CharIn and together with UL, our partners, to roll out the entire plug and charge protocol in Europe. And we, as Irdeto, we will be the root certificate and we will be the sub 1 certificate authority, giving also the possibility to those smaller charging infrastructure players that do not have facility for doing their own sub CA2. We can also do that for them. All of this is based on the ISO 15118 /2 and /20 standard, and we will actually be the first ones that are implementing the /20 standard. So that was, oh yeah, my summary. Sorry, I got into it. So what have I said in the last 20 minutes, in case you lost, in case you got distracted by your phone, whatever? We know that the EVs are increasing, that they're becoming more and more popular. All the major manufacturers are committing to electrify their whole fleet offering. Enabled to have a massive EV adoption, we need to ease the usage of the electric vehicles. And by easing the usage of the electric vehicles is easing the whole infrastructure around them. So the proposition that is now being developed for making the usability friendly is the plug and charge standard. The plug and charge give rise to many use cases that are involving various stakeholders, and the communication between the trust between all of these stakeholders has to be essential, and is essential for being able to manage the whole infrastructure appropriately. The PKI is the technology that is being used currently to enable the secure authentication and authorization via the plug and charge in accordance with the ISO 15118 standard that I talked about right now. And I explained a little on what is behind that standard and how the plug and charge is working. So yeah, that was my talk. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm looking forward for your questions.
Great. Thanks, Carla, for that talk. Very interesting insights. And we have a bunch of questions starting to stream in already. So let's see how many of these we can get through. Um, okay, so the first question is from Abdul Rahman. So I guess that goes more in the direction of, is the solution quantum proof? And since you're using PKI, and we know that PKI is the example that's given, for the PKI is the first algorithm that will be broken once quantum computers are real. So what is your view on this?
That's, I mean, yeah, I think you just said it. I mean, the solution is as proof as the PKI is at the moment. Once this is broken, I can't really, I mean, of course, we will develop and we will continue the research into that direction. And as the industry keeps evolving, we will keep evolving our solution into that. Today, it is as the whole PKI standard is in the whole globe. So I mean, I'm pretty confident that we will work in a solution that will be quantum proof the moment when that is broken. But since we're not there yet, it's kind of hard to say more on that.
Right. Okay. Next question. So this is from Pavitra. So who issues the root certificate for the entire ecosystem?
So, as I explained, well, it will always depend on what ecosystem we're talking about. So, for Europe, for the plug and charge, for the chart in ecosystem, we're going to be the root certificates, and we're going to be the ones that are going to be issuing those. But as I mentioned before, so you have one or small number of trust authorities, which will be the ones that are going to be trusted by the entire ecosystem, and the ecosystem will be defined either on country base or continent or so on. For the case of charring in Europe, we are the ones that are providing that and issuing that.
Okay, great. So the next question is from Valerio from NXP. So for similar use cases where devices are allowed to communicate with the energy infrastructure, so like things like smart meters, security protection profiles have been defined by regulatory entities. Before issuing a certificate or allowing communication, um, I guess there's supposed to be a remainder of the question. Yeah, is there a model for ensuring trustability of devices in the field, so vehicles and chargers, and to check that the device has not been hacked or certificate stolen?
So there is, I mean, this whole infrastructure, I mean, yeah, the standards are, let me read again your question. Sorry, I got a little lost. But there is a model ensuring the trustability between all of the devices, between the vehicles and the chargers. The ISO standard, basically what it says, it defines different roles, and those roles, I mean, what I showed in this image was just the charge point operator, but you also have the role for the EV, for the vehicle, and so on, and the different stakeholders, and the communication is always going to happen on that level. So there is a possibility of revoking certificates once this have been compromised and so on. And but that follows the standards that are being issued by the different industries. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but um
I think
Yeah,
some of this also had to do with revocation for once when you detect the device are compromised. So I guess
yeah. I mean, the system is able to revoke, of course, any compromised certificates.
okay. Um, okay, the next question is from Faludi. This actually goes in a direction that I like also. So, what about consideration of tracking users through certificate subjects? So, more on the privacy side of things.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of discussions happening. We are currently in several discussions with the whole chart in members, and we are considering different use cases and so on. It's one of the topics that is being under discussion. There has not been any solid answer into how we're going to do that. There is, of course, the concern of how do you track users with by respecting the whole GDPR and data protection and all of that, and how deep can you go for that? But there is, of course, a lot of discussions happening around that, and there will be, I'm pretty sure, some decisions that are going to be made on industry level or on organization level. In this case, for example, char in, but it can also happen on different organizations that how they want to handle those things.
Great. Okay. The next question is from Royston. So, does every device or component that participates in the PKI and hold the root certificate will need to have a HSM connected to it? Especially since bigger ECUs are split into smaller ECUs to achieve distributed processing.
So, one when you're talking about EC, you don't have to have this in every single ECU that is part of one asset, let's say. So if there's one communication, so the standard is defined for the specific stakeholder. So as long as you have within the ECU, and that is the one that can be distributed amongst them, then it can happen on that. So you don't have to have that in every single ECU that is gonna play a role in the ecosystem.
Okay. So one additional question from my side, actually. So more looking at this from a high level point of view, right? So EVs are sort of almost like designed from ground up, and we had the opportunity to do this right? So bake security into the fundamental layer so that we're not playing catch up later, like every other domain that we do this in. Uh, so, like you said, like Europe is doing this well, but every country. So I know like US has a big bill to push out EV charging infrastructure. India has a big bill. I know like some other Asian countries also. Are other countries also like thinking about security as seriously? And are there company? I mean, uh, like, is there a government push for security so that it's baked into fundamental architectures, not as a add-on solution later?
So I would say that goes into different level. Like your question goes into different levels. First of all, is yeah, most of the. I mean, we are talking with several countries and several, we can say, other regions that are implementing this. We talked about Char in Europe. This is an organization, and this is um, consisting of several stakeholders. But as you know, this plug and charge, I mean, this is following the ISO standard, and this will be followed by every stakeholder that wants to play. We've read a lot of news in different countries that one manufacturer is implementing plug and charge and so on, and that will have to follow this standard. So there are governmental push, but it's more coming from the industry. It's more coming from the stakeholders in the industry that are interested in the technology to be implemented properly. And for the proper implementation of the technology, there has to be a proper implementation of the standards. So I would say it's more being pushed by the industry, but there are some governmental discussions also happening.
Great. Uh, yeah, for some of the other questions that we couldn't get to, Carla will be available in the networking session afterwards. So there's a dedicated table for stage one. Please do find her there. Carla, you can, if you go to the networking lounge, you'll see a dedicated table for speakers, and then people can meet you there and network with you. Right. Uh, and this was then our final talk for this session. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Carla, thank you for that interesting discussion and that great talk. Really enjoyed it. I hope everybody in the audience has had enjoyed this as well. Um, we will have our closing ceremony for the conference now, and after which the networking booths will. I mean, the networking booths are still open, but they will stay open till the last participant leaves. So yes. So thank you everybody for attending. Thanks,
Thank you
Carla.
very much.